Lindy. Almost a year ago, I left my marriage that was abusive and highly toxic. I've experienced many symptoms of narcissistic abuse and battered woman syndrome, such as feeling like everything was my fault, being highly confused about conversations due to gaslighting, and more. It wasn't until I listened to the stories of others who had experienced the same kind of abuse and neglect that I realized the reality of the abuse cycle that I was in, and I got out. I'm in the process of healing and retraining my brain after years and years of narcissistic abuse. Hearing others' wake-up calls and how they healed and are healing from their abuse has helped me in my journey so much. So I'm here to help share the stories of the voices that were unheard, ignored, and belittled, and share what has helped me and them heal from this kind of trauma. Let's get out of survival mode and learn how to be happy and whole again, together. This is Behind Closed Doors. I'm your host, Lindy. For the privacy of our guests and their abusers, we are referring to the abusers as my ex and will not call them by name. Please be advised that Behind Closed Doors covers topics that may be triggering to some listeners, including discussions of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Please take care while listening. Okay, here we are, season 1, episode 1. We are going to be talking with one of my very good friends, Keana. I have known her since the 5th grade. Keana is someone who is very kind, very loving. She's funny. She's hilarious. She has one of the most beautiful voices I have ever heard. So maybe she'll grace us with a song.
Probably not.
She is a very strong-minded person, that's for sure. I know that she's always been very independent as well. So welcome, Keana.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I feel so just so honored to be the first guest on the podcast.
Yes, well, you have a very, very cool and crazy story, and I loved getting to hear your story, and honestly, your story was very helpful for me in my process of staying out of my abusive relationship. I remember several times you would call me up when I was kind of second guessing things, and you'd be like, all right,
no.
Yeah, you're
Get your head in the game.
We need to talk because this is not going to happen because, the cycle of abuse, you and I would go through very similar things with how our abusers would, try to
manipulate you and
reel us back in.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So, just tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are as a person.
All right.
What you like to do.
My name's Keana. I'm from Montana.
Montucky.
I love Montucky. I moved away for a while after high school. I was married before this relationship to someone who wasn't abusive. They just weren't around.
And they weren't faithful.
And they were not faithful.
Right.
Yeah. So then when I got out of that relationship, about a year later, I met my ex, who we will be talking about. And yeah, when I met him, I was in Vegas at the time. But that I guess doesn't really have anything to do with who I am.
That's okay. Well, you lived in Vegas. We know that now.
Yeah, I did live in Vegas. Yeah. I lived in Arizona, Florida, LA, Seattle, and then I came back.
I did not know you lived in Florida. That's awesome.
Yeah. Jupiter.
Wow. Jupiter, Florida?
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. I've never heard of that. I've always been afraid to move to Florida because of snakes. Huge snakes.
And alligators.
Yeah.
No, they're pretty cool. I always wanted to catch an alligator.
But. So, as I mentioned, you're a very good singer. You're artistic.
Yes. I love to sing. I am currently in school, esthetician school, and I only have about 3 weeks left, and then I'll be working at a med spa.
Woohoo!
So I love to help people. I've always worked in the service industry. I have an amazing family. I grew up with great parents. I grew up very Christian, but not in a weird, definitely conservative, but not overly cultish.
Right.
Yeah. It was a Baptist church. It was very strict in the beginning, and then my parents kind of got out of that, and then we've been going to a non-denominational church since then. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
and I continue to do that. And so that's a big part of my life today.
Yeah, I'll definitely be asking you a little bit about that because I know with my abuse story, my faith was definitely like a roller coaster, or it has been.
Also used against you.
Right.
Which is something we like to do.
So how did you and your ex meet then?
So we met on Tinder.
Ooh, I love it.
Yeah. So I was in Vegas. I was like in the middle of a divorce for like the whole year. And my first husband he didn't want to get a divorce. So he was like, let's wait a year. And then if in a year you're still serious, like, let's do it because I want you back. And if you'll come back, then like, just give it a year, please. I was like, all right, whatever. So I gave it a year. And then I ended up calling him because I was getting serious with my ex.
Gotcha.
And then I was like, well, I'm getting serious with a new person. Like, I need you to come and get this divorce over with. So then that happened. Like 2 months into our relationship, and it was getting serious.
Gotcha.
Like quotation marks. I felt like it was like gonna be a serious person that I was gonna date.
Yeah.
But yeah, we met on Tinder. We went on a date at a Mexican restaurant. And I don't know. I felt really wanted in that date. And I hadn't felt that way before because with my previous ex, he was never around and he was cheating on me all the time.
Right.
And so like I wanted somebody who wanted me.
Right.
And he made it known that very first date, like, I want you and I'm serious about you. Like literally within our first date. And so that was kind of one of the things that hooked me initially because I was like, oh, this guy's like serious about me from day one. Yeah. Like he knows what he wants and
that confidence.
Yes, he had confidence and he was like, he even told me that first date, because he like wanted me to kiss him and I was like, no, I'm not going to kiss you. It's the first date.
Right.
And then he's like, well, you're going to be my girlfriend soon. It's fine. And I was like, oh, okay. Like somebody is feeling overly confident.
Yeah.
But it also was like an attraction because I was like, oh, like he obviously is going to pursue me.
Right.
And he did. And he was very serious. And he was like, I think within like 3 or 4 months, he had gotten me a promise ring. And was like, serious? Like when he gave it to me, he was like, this is a promise that I'm going to marry you. Wow. I was like, okay. Yeah. Like very quick. And he was doing all the right things. He would get me flowers. Like if not once, twice a week. He would have like a floral arrangement made for me. If I was sick, because I've always like been sick, he would like have a special bouquet made for me because I was sick. And he would have like a cute little note and like he would do all the things like make sure I knew that he was there and cared about me. Right. Right. And so that was the initial like, wow, this guy's doing all of the right things. My parents were even like, nobody's ever treated you this way. We've never seen this from anyone. Yeah. For any of our kids, like this is what we ideally want. He went to church with me. He was praying with me. He was reading his Bible with me. It was like all the things that I had always said I wanted. Right. He was giving that to me. Green flags. All green flags. Right. There was like literally nothing that was not a green flag. No yellow flags even. Wow. So, yeah. So the initial, I was like, okay, like he's showing up and he's doing the right things. And me and my whole family were super excited because we were like, this is what it's supposed to be. And then obviously that didn't last forever. So what do you think the first red flag was? Because you said, there weren't even really any yellow flags. So, and that was like the first 6 months, literally no red flags. 6 months in, he started asking me like, you sure you're not talking to anyone? Like it kind of came out of nowhere. Right. And I remember my brother came to visit in Vegas and I was telling him, I was like, so yeah, everything's perfect. Like I literally have never had a more perfect relationship, but now he's starting to ask me like, are you sure you don't want to see anyone else? Are you talking to anyone else? He wasn't accusing me of cheating yet, but he was borderline like asking me.
Like prying kind of.
Yeah. And like, do you care if I look at your phone? And I was like, no, go ahead. Like, I don't have anything to hide. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So like he had my password, whatever. And that was like the first red flag for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time I saw it as like, oh, he just has an insecurity about this because everybody's cheated on him in the past. And I was like, I have that same insecurity, but I wasn't putting two and two together that I wasn't also doing those things to him, even though I had been in worse situations than him.
Right.
In relationships. You know what I mean? So I was like, okay, well, this is the first yellow flag. It's fine. We'll get over it. It's just like a bump in the road.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my brother saying, yeah, but it sounds like kind of iffy. I was like, well, can you talk to him and let him know like what kind of person I am? Like, you've grown up with me. You know that I would never cheat on someone.
Right.
So then he talked to him. And I remember he came back to me and he's like, I don't know. Like, he still seems pretty insecure in this area.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like, I think that's something you should look out for. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So that was like 6 months in, I kind of had that. But it wasn't anything crazy at that point.
And you said that your family loved him?
Everybody.
Everybody
who had met him and my family, friends, they all loved him. He was like the ideal man.
For you.
For me.
And kind of in general.
And in general, like everybody wants their daughter or their friend or their granddaughter or niece, whatever, sister. They want you to be happy and they want the guy to be making the effort and putting in all of the things that you had ever dreamed of. Mm-hmm. And that was what was in front of me at the time.
Right. I would definitely say that he love bombed you.
For sure.
Into the relationship.
Yes.
Where you
flowers all the time. He would get me like cute little like stuffed animals. He would get me like anytime I'd be like, oh, like we were just like scrolling online or something. I'd be like, those shoes are cute. Mm-hmm. I would have those shoes.
Wow.
It was like,
he was putting in some effort and you felt special.
For sure.
Yeah.
And he was always saying the right things, always doing the right things. He showed up anytime I was sick. And that was a big thing for me because I've grown up with lupus. So I was like, whenever I'm sick, I want that person to be there for me.
Exactly.
And he did those things. And my ex-husband before him did not do those things.
Right.
He would leave me in the hospital for like a week while I was having surgery and I wouldn't see him. Mm-hmm. And so when I had gotten those things from this guy, I was like, oh, okay. Like he actually loves me.
Another green flag. I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. That's crazy to me. Like I heard a saying where they said like the red flags at the beginning that you ignored are the reasons why you end up leaving in the end. So I'm just trying to like take note of the red flags that he actually did give you, because it sounds like at first he was like almost perfect. Like,
yes,
you couldn't. I mean, we kind of discussed the love bombing. So would you say that it was like a honeymoon stage with him?
Definitely, but like more than I've ever had with anybody before.
And would you say that he was like the best boyfriend that you've ever had?
For sure. And I would even tell people that. I would be like, he's the ideal person, the one that I always thought I would have. But I was like, he's doing all the things that I never thought somebody would do for me.
Right. Okay. So you said the first kind of red flag was
6 months in.
6 months in. How did he like propose to you, and what was the wedding like? What was your honeymoon like? Was there a point at that point where your family members or friends were noticing anything, or was it still good at that point?
For sure. So the 6 months in, we had that like little yellow flag is what I thought at the time.
Right.
It's like, okay, like he's a little bit jealous or he's a little bit cautious because he's been in bad relationships. I was like, that's not really a red flag. People have all sorts of insecurities, whatever. That was what I was telling myself in my head. Fast forward 2 months later, he proposes. So we were 8 months into our relationship. He proposes to me.
Okay.
And I said yes.
Had you met his family at that point? I can't remember. No.
So we'll get into that too.
Okay. Yeah.
So 2 months later, he proposes. Everything's great. I'd say within like a couple weeks after he proposed, there were red flags starting to show.
Okay.
So he didn't really show his true colors till after the proposal. And it was pretty much the same thing. It was jealousy. It was are you sure you're not talking to anyone?
Mm-hmm.
If like a guy from work messaged me about something about work, he'd be like, are you cheating on me with him?
Hmm.
So it wouldn't be like, it wasn't insane yet. I'd say like 2 months before the wedding, because we got married like 6 months later.
Right.
So in that time, that was the only really red flag in there.
Mm-hmm.
2 months before the wedding, one of my like good friends growing up, she came to visit. She stayed at the house, and this was probably our first big fight ever. So she came to the house in the car ride when we picked her up from the airport or wherever we picked her up from. Car ride home, she was talking about like going to a Chippendale show or something.
Yeah.
And she was married at the time. I was in her wedding. And her and one of her good friends came down and they stayed with us. And on the car ride, she was talking about their Chippendale show that they wanted to go to or something. And then, or that they had just gone to, something like that. But then we get home and they're going to bed, like on the opposite side of the house. We're going to bed. And as we like get in bed, he starts basically freaking out that she would go to a Chippendale show when she's married. And he was like, that's the kind of friends that you have?
Yep.
He was like, I can't believe you would be friends with somebody that would do that. That's basically cheating.
Right.
I was like, oh, well, I didn't ever think of anything like that. And I was like, if you don't want me to be friends with her, like, I don't think that's really an option, but I don't have to be around her as much. We don't live in the same state anyway, so we rarely saw each other. I was like, and it's not like I went to the Chippendale show, so why are you upset?
Right.
Started a huge fight. He was screaming at me. This was the first time it got, like, to that point. Like, we had arguments, but never a fight.
Yeah.
And this was our first fight.
And were you, like, very surprised by his reaction?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was shook.
And when he freaked out like that, was he doing it kind of in like a roundabout way where he's like really just talking down about your friend and making you feel guilty? Or what did he start like insulting you at that point? So
it was first started out the argument about her, and I was like, okay, well, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, she's my friend. I wasn't at the show.
Right.
And
you weren't even there.
And I was telling him I don't think it's a big deal. So then he's like, oh, so you do that to me.
Gotcha.
And then that's how it turned into like the argument against him and I. He kind of switched it to be like, oh, well, I guess that's like something you would do too.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, great. Like, here we go. So then that was the first time I saw that side of him, and I was like, dang, like, this is a whole new person.
And how did that fight like end? Did you feel that you had to go and submit and like say, I'm sorry?
Yes, I had to be the one to apologize, even though he was the one screaming at me. And I was surprised because the next day I asked her, I was like, did you hear us fighting last night? And she was like, no. And I was like, dang, because he was screaming. Like, he was like wilding out.
Did he like throw anything at that point or punch a wall? Or
at that point, I think he was like getting like in my face, but he wasn't hitting anything, throwing anything, doing anything like that. He was just basically throwing a fit.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it hadn't gotten to the point where it had gotten later. But yeah, so that one, she ended up leaving like the next day. She only stayed with us for a night or two, I think. And I talked to her about it, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know what to do. This just happened. And she's like, well, like, I don't want you to be unhappy, but she was like, maybe just see if you guys can resolve it, whatever.
Yeah.
And then she left, and then him and I fought again that next day about the same thing.
Really? Did he just bring it up again?
Yeah. And then, so it went back like in circles and circles and circles. And that was the first time that I had like a fight with him. That was not just like an argument that we figured out. It was like a fight. Like, and it wasn't going anywhere. It was like constantly coming back that I was in the wrong somehow. About her going to a Chippendale show. And like, it didn't make any sense, but at the time I was like, okay, I understand. I'm sorry. Like, that's my bad, whatever. And then I was like, okay, well, I don't have to be friends with her anymore, because I was to the point where like he made it seem like she was such a horrible person.
So this was 8 months in, you said 2 months after
This was like 10 months.
Oh, 10 months
or
in. Okay.
11 months in, something like that.
So it sounds like he did a very good job at the beginning with kind of the love bombing, making you feel like you're the most important person in the world.
And he kept that up throughout. So like when we would get in these huge fights, then after that point, he would like buy me flowers and say sorry.
Gotcha.
And you know, like
that was my next question was like, did he punish you?
End.
Okay.
So like he would be horrible to me,
Mm-hmm.
and then he'd be like, okay, like let's stop fighting. And then the next day I'd get like flowers and stuff.
Okay.
I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, so he's actually trying to work on this, whatever.
Right.
You know
and that's definitely what you think. You think like, okay, like we had a conflict, which is so normal in relationship.
Yeah.
You're like, there's a conflict there, but oh, look at him. He's trying. He's sorry. He got me something. Right. So, okay.
Yeah. So I was like, okay. And he just was like, I'm working on this. I'm sorry. I know I have a problem. And then we're like praying together and stuff and back to like,
okay.
You know, like the normal, whatever.
Okay. And so you didn't feel that he would like punish you or anything like that after a fight? Would it just kind of be like, I'm sorry. And then he would like get you flowers or whatever?
Yeah. It was pretty much to that extent at that point.
Gotcha. Yeah. I'm just trying to understand. It is very interesting how like abusers can be so similar in ways, but then
so different in other ways.
Exactly. Yeah. Like everyone's story is different. And that's why this is so cool, like sharing everyone's stories, because I know you for me,
kind of hear,
yeah, exactly. Like I know for me, when we would fight, I always had to apologize. And then I would be punished, literally punished for like a week, sometimes, you know, a few days, but it was like a period of time where like I was in the doghouse.
So in the beginning, it was not like that. It was like,
gotcha.
He would go turn around right away, try to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would be the one to say sorry initially in it, and then we'd like make up or whatever, and then the next day he'd apologize and be like, I'm sorry, and like give me flowers or something, which was the go-to, was flowers for that. And then I'd say 2 months before the wedding, so this was like a month later maybe, it escalated very quickly.
Gotcha.
Into throwing things.
Okay.
He hadn't like punched a wall or anything, but he would like throw things, like break something on the ground or whatever. And then he would get in my face, like when we would have a fight. And it was usually because like a guy looked at me or something. And then it would turn into a fight, and he'd be like, did you want him? And I was like, I didn't even see the guy you're talking about. And he's like, you're lying.
Would he do that in public, or would he wait until you got home?
Not initially. It would be when we got home.
Okay.
It was always at home. And then it would be this huge argument. There was one time, I'm trying to think, because there were like a lot of different times,
and you can share all of them if you think of
one of them. I don't even remember what it was, but I think somebody looked at me, and I didn't even know who he was talking about. And it was like outside while we were getting out of the car or something in our neighborhood. So then he was like, oh, well, like you entertained that, and looked back at him. And I was like, I don't even know who you're talking about.
Common courtesy is just dead in his eyes. You can't even look at somebody.
No. So there was this time, this was later on once we were married, but we were at a grocery store, like Walmart, I'm pretty sure. There was this older Asian man, just this little tiny Asian man. He was so cute. And he was like carrying a bunch of bananas, like literally like 2 armfuls of bananas.
That's adorable.
And he dropped some of them. So like I run over and I'm trying to help him pick them up and like put them in a cart for him. And right after I do that, then my ex was like, do you like him or something?
No,
literally, this is like a 70-year-old man that I'm helping. And he was like, do you like him? Do you want him? Like, is that what you want?
So when you first started dating, would he ever comment on like how caring you were and like something like that?
Yes.
Like, oh, I love how you help innocent Asian, sweet Asian men. like,
no, he'd be like, you're so caring. I love how you just like love people and blah, blah, blah. So like, initially, he liked all of those things about me.
Right.
And then it turned into turning it against me and being like, oh, so now you like that guy.
You want to be with him now.
Yeah.
Right. Next time on Behind Closed Doors.
Like in the bedroom fighting, he punched one of the walls, like just going wild. And then I go into the closet, and it was like a door that you could lock from the inside. So I locked the door, and I was just sitting there crying, and I was like, oh my gosh, like what did I get myself into? And he's outside the door, like banging on the door, screaming at me, like cursing at me, kicking the door, like literally throwing a tantrum like a 2-year-old, but like a grown man that's twice my size.
The content shared on Behind Closed Doors is intended for informational purposes only. I am not a therapist, doctor, or licensed mental health professional. The stories and experiences shared by our guests are personal and unique to them. While I take precautions to validate the authenticity of the events discussed, please note that these are individual perspectives and may not reflect the experiences of others. If you or someone you know is in need of professional support, please seek help from a qualified therapist or medical professional. If you or someone you know is being abused, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. If you or someone you know is experiencing a suicidal crisis or emotional distress, please call 1-800-273-8255. For more resources, please click the link in the description box.